Well, hi there. Welcome to ChessBase Workshop. My name is Steve Lopez. Thank you for clicking on that link and joining us for this little presentation that we do every week. Right now, what we're looking at, as we've been looking at for the last several weeks, is ChessBase Light, which is a free demo cut-down version of ChessBase, if you will. You can get it for free. Download it from www.chessbase.com. There's a couple different flavors of ChessBase Light. There's a registered version and the unregistered version. Obviously, when you download it and install it, it is unregistered. And what that means, there are some features of it that are going to be disabled. To enable them, you pony up a few bucks, buy our activation key for your software, and that activates the other parts of the program. One of them I will demonstrate right now, which is this. I was looking at this game, and white plays b4 when the currently accepted move is instead queen f4, and I went to use replace game to save that little variation in the game, and when I clicked replace, what I got was this program has not been activated yet. You cannot save games. Please enter an activation key to get full access. And if you're hooked up the internet, you click buy activation key, and that shoots you to the ChessBase site. You can cough up a few bucks and activate your program, get an activation key. However, what I prefer to do in these presentations is use the free version to show you all the things you can do basically for nothing, just for downloading the software and installing it. Also, by the way, if you are a ChessBase 10 user and you're not that familiar with the software, please do pay attention to these series of videos on ChessBase Light, because all of this stuff also applies to ChessBase 10. I'm looking at a game from 1899 right here, a Carl Schlechter game. And I like looking at old 1800s games because these guys were tactical wizards. A lot of these games are highly entertaining due to the tactics. But another thing is you find really, really cool opening ideas in older games. They're not necessarily bad ideas. They're just ideas that have gone out of fashion, gone out of style in the years since these games were played. So you can find some interesting little tricks and traps to throw at your opponent, some interesting moves where they're all booked up in a particular line of the Roy Lopez, and you play some move that is not bad, it just hasn't been seen since the 1870s, and suddenly your opponent goes, "Wah!" and just freaks out because it's nothing he's seen before. So I'm looking at a position right here, and it's not a terribly interesting position other than positions similar to this come up again and again in the Roy Lopez. We're looking at a white pawn on a4, a black pawn on b5, and the question at this point is who blinks first. Sometimes you see black swap off the pawn, sometimes you see white swap off the pawn. In this particular game, white jumped first and did this, but I was just kind of curious as to, possibly is there something a little better for white in this position than to immediately exchange the pawns at this point. Unfortunately, for me, it's fairly early in the day, and my master and grandmaster friends don't like to get phone calls this early in the morning. So what do? What I do is I call upon a chess engine, a chess playing program, to give me advice in this position. That's going to be our topic of this ChessBase workshop, possibly the next one. It may take a couple of videos to get through all this, and it does get a little bit technical, so I'll go slow. I'll warn you in advance. We're going to look at a couple of technical details, but I'm going to try to make it as painless as possible. What I'm going to do is start a chess playing program, and in ChessBase Light you don't actually play chess against the chess engine, but I do call it a chess playing program because that just makes it a little more easy to understand for people that aren't that familiar with it. What a chess engine is a chess brain. It'll look at a position, chew on it, and give you what it thinks is the best possible move in that position. And the longer you let it think, the better a move you get. And that's what a chess engine is. And in a chess playing program, you could actually be playing against the software. In this one, you're just using it as an advisor. In ChessBase Light and ChessBase 10, chess engines are used in an advisory capacity. What would you play in this position, Fritz, or whatever engine you happen to be using? And it will tell you. And that's what I'm interested in finding out. So what I'm going to do is go up to the menus up here. I'm going to go to the engine menu. And you'll see it says Add Kibitzer Fritz 5.32. It's an older version of Fritz that comes with ChessBase Light. It's about 10 years old, this program now, but it still does a fine job of analysis. So I'm going to click on that, and you will see that a window is open up down here in the corner, and we have Fritz 5.32 chewing on this position, trying to determine what the best course of action for white would be in this position. I'm going to let it run for a little while. The longer you let it run, the deeper it looks into the position, and it will ultimately come up with suggestions for you. And you can let it run forever. It'll run until you stop it. There's no point where it just stops and a little bell goes ding and shows you the best move. It will show you the best move it's come up with in any given time, which right now, if you were looking down in this corner where it was showing you analysis, for quite a while there it was showing A takes B5 as being the move, but now that it's looked a little bit deeper, now it's saying Queen F4 is possibly the way to go, which I find interesting because that is the modern move at move 13, as we saw up here, is Queen F4. So what I've already learned is that in this particular opening, that's a good place for the queen in a lot of cases. So I've already learned that. In fact, what's happened in modern times is the queen gets out to F4 a lot earlier in the game, as we see. It usually happens at move 13 these days. Back then they played a little differently. We're going to stop right here. No, I tell you what, let me let it look for just a little while longer, because I have something I want to show you. What we're going to do is explain what this information is down here in this window. First of all, when it's talking about search depth, and this is I will go ahead and stop it at this point. This is a term you're going to need to know to understand how far ahead a chess engine has looked into a position. What depth is measured in is something called plies, or half moves. Now, when you look at a game of chess, like this game, for example, 1 e4, e5, we say that's one move. That's not really true, because both players have moved. The position has changed twice. So when white plays 1 e4, that's one ply. When black plays 1 e5 in response, that's another ply. Then when white plays knight f3, that's another ply. Knight c6 is another ply. Then white plays bishop b5. As you're seeing up here, I'm just reading it right off the screen. What you're looking at is a position that has gone 5 plies, or 5 half moves into the game. 1 e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. That's 5 individual moves, 5 plies. 5 half moves is another word for a ply. So when you're looking at depth down here, what we're looking at is that Fritz has looked for 12 plies at this point. What it has done, instead of looking 12 moves for each player ahead, it has looked 12 plies ahead, which is the same thing as looking 6 moves ahead, 6 move pairs ahead. When it gets to a depth of 12, each player has moved 6 times. Now the way it looks is it looks at a move, and then it looks at all possible replies to that move. Then it looks at all possible replies to those replies, and it keeps doing this. And this tree, this ever-branching tree of variations, keeps moving ahead with more and more and more and more and more moves. And what it does is it evaluates every single one of those positions, and ultimately comes up with a decision as to what the best move is. And that's what a lot of this information in this panel down here in the lower right-hand corner that I'm moving the mouse around right now, that's what it's geared toward. What we're looking at, excuse me, is Fritz has looked at basically 12 plies ahead, 6 full moves ahead, and what it has determined is that this variation is best play for each player. And the best move for white in this position, which is mainly what I'm looking at right here, is anything better than swapping the pawns off, is Queen F4 is the best move that it has found in this position. It does give you additional information. If this line of play is followed, if this exact variation is played out to move 19, after B takes A4, also answering your question, at this point in this position, black would actually take on A4 instead of white taking on B5. If that's played out, what we have is a dead level position. That's what the little equal sign stands for. 0.00 means it is dead level. It means that neither player has an advantage at this point. Depth, it made this determination of this line of play after it had looked 11 plies ahead in what's called a brute force search, where it tries to look at everything. The number after the slash is a selective search. What that means is that there are certain forcing moves that will occur. There are checks, which forces a move. There are captures, which usually forces a recapture or forces some other kind of move, etc. When you have these forcing moves, a computer can look much farther ahead, because a forced move is a forced move. It's a forced reply. So it's actually looked 33 plies ahead in a selective search where it's looking at forcing moves. It took 43 seconds for it to come into this determination, and what it looked at was over 30 million positions. KN stands for kilonodes. That means thousands of positions. It's looked at 30,845,000 positions. And if you look up here, this gives you the speed. It looks at 706,000 positions a second as it's analyzing. So that's pretty interesting stuff. Currently, this material up here deals with what the engine is currently doing. If I hadn't stopped it, it was currently looking at the 12th ply of the search, 12 plies ahead, as far as how far ahead it's looked. The depth of the search has been 12 plies. Looking at 706,000 positions a second. It's looking currently at 15 Queen F4, which is one move of 36 possible moves in that position. That's what this stuff in these parentheses right here mean. There are 36 possible moves in a position. If I hadn't stopped it, it was currently looking at the first move. If I click go, I think it has to start all over again. Yes, it does. But we'll watch it, and you'll see these numbers change. And you'll see these the number before the slash right here incrementally move up very quickly, because it's looking at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 15 of the 36 possible moves. That gives you an idea of what it's currently looking at as you're seeing this change. And these values will change as Fritz looks deeper and deeper into a position, as it looks more deeply farther ahead. These values change, and of course this stuff in this window definitely changes down here. You can see after a 15-second search it settles on Queen F4. One thing you'll notice, though, is as the computer looks more and more and more and more deeply ahead into a position, the search slows down. And that's because every time you lay another ply into the search, every time you go one more half move ahead, you're increasing exponentially the number of moves that the computer has to evaluate. That's why it tends to slow down the deeper it goes. And what you'll notice with Fritz 5.32, even on a fast machine, is that you're probably not going to get a tremendously deep search out of it. It's going to go maybe 12 to 15 plies deep before you finally lose patience and get tired of waiting around and decide that you want to stop it and just go with what it says right now. In fact, you're looking right now at pretty much where we were before. Other than the number of moves per second, which has dropped somewhat, and it's because I'm making a video on this machine, and as the video gets longer, there's less RAM and there's less memory for the engine to work with. So that's dropped a little bit, but you'll notice that most of this information is just exactly what we were looking at before. If you let Fritz look to a depth of 12 ply, it will always come up with the same answer. Chess engines don't change their minds that way. They're not capricious the way people are. You'll see now it's starting to move ahead a little bit. Now it's looking at the 5th of 36 possible moves, now 6. And there's the move it's looking at, the move it's considering. And it will continue to go ahead, and this will jump up to 13 here directly. And maybe, possibly, we'll see the evaluation change. In fact, we already have. You'll see a variation now ends with Rook A8 instead of the pawn swap over here. It's looked at over 73 million positions at this point as well. There we go, we've made depth 13, so we've squeezed another ply out of it by waiting another couple of minutes, and we have a different evaluation. Now, if we wait even longer, if I was to let this run for another 4 or 5 minutes, we would get to 14 or 15 ply search depth, and we would very likely see something very different for the line of play here. But one thing we are noticing, in addition to the fact that we've learned that Queen F4, in Fritz's opinion, is the best move in this position, we're also learning that the position doesn't change, the valuation rather doesn't change very much. It's still showing equality. Basically, the players are pretty close together. We're showing minus 0.12, meaning that black would be ahead in this position by about 1/10 of a pawn, which is pretty close to nothing. When you're evaluating positions, by the way, what it's showing is 0.12 means 12 1/100ths of a pawn. That's what this number in this set of brackets means. It's shown in centipawns. If it said 1.12, it would be 1.12 pawns. A pawn, basically 1 1/10 pawns, is what that would mean. Right now, though, is that black would be ahead. If this variation is played, black would be ahead by about 12 1/100ths of a pawn, which isn't much. To give you an idea of what this means in chess terms, if you lose a tempo is equivalent to about 1/3 of a pawn, 0.30. So this is a very negligible difference here. So for all intents and purposes, the players are still going to be even after this variation is played. if we like to play that variation out, by the way, you can right click. Let me show you what I did. We're going to right click in this box where it's showing this line of play, right click and select copy to notation, and it pops it right into the notation there, and we'll stop the engine at this point. A takes B5 is what was actually played in the game. However, if we would like to see what Fritz thought in this position, we go back to the position it was analyzing, and Fritz 5.32 thinks that Queen F4 is the move that should be played. And notice that every time we change moves, the engine springs to life and begins to show us analysis of the current position. So every time you change positions in the game, the engine will react, and the engine will begin to analyze whatever the current board position is. But we see that Queen F4 is what Fritz thought was best, and we can just play through the remaining moves, reach a position, and we see that Fritz thought, after a 13-ply search, that this was the best line of play, and that black would be slightly, very slightly ahead in this position. That's basically how you use a chess engine. Now, there are some other tricks that we can do with Fritz 5.32 in ChessBase Light, and we're going to look at those in our next ChessBase workshop. Now, I realize I laid a bunch of material on you here, and I apologize for doing that. Again, it is a technical thing. You have to be able to interpret this information in this window. I've also written some older articles on the ChessBase website that also talk about how to interpret the engine analysis. It may be worthwhile going back and doing a search at www.chessbase.com to find some of these older articles that also explain this same material. And of course, there's nothing that says you can't go back and watch this video a second time. I don't know that I'd wish that on my worst enemy, but that's entirely up to you. You can review the video at your leisure and go back and look at it again and review the material. Next time around in ChessBase Workshop, we're going to play around with the engine a little bit more. We're going to show you a few more tricks that you can do with the engine pane in ChessBase Light and also in ChessBase 10. All of this material also applies to ChessBase 10. So we'll do that in the next ChessBase Workshop. Until then, have fun.